A Night of Horror by Dick Donovan and read by Christopher Halton. Bleak Hill Castle. My dear old chum, before you leave England for the East, I claim the redemption of a promise you made to me some time ago that you would give me the pleasure of a week or two of your company. Besides, as you may already have guessed, I have given up the folly of my bachelor days and have taken unto myself the sweetest woman that ever walked the face of the earth. We have been married just 6 months and are as happy as the day is long. And then, this place is entirely after your own heart. It will excite all your artistic faculties and appeal with irresistible force to your romantic nature. To call the building a castle is somewhat pretentious, but I believe it has been known as the castle ever since it was built, more than 200 years ago. Hester is delighted with it, and if either of us were in the least degree superstitious, we might see or hear ghosts every hour of the day. Of course, as becomes a castle, we have a haunted room, though my own impression is that it is haunted by nothing more fearsome than rats. Anyway, it is such a picturesque, curious sort of chamber that if it hasn't a ghost it ought to have. But I have no doubt, old chap, that you will make one of us, for, as I remember, you have always had a love for the eerie and creepy, and you cannot forget how angry you used to get with me sometimes for chaffing you about your avowed belief in the occult and supernatural, and what you were pleased to term the inexplicable phenomena of psychomancy. However, it is possible you have got over some of the errors of your youth. But whether or not, come down and rest assured that you will meet with the heartiest of welcomes. Your old pal, Dick Dirckman. The above letter was from my old friend and college chum, who, having inherited a substantial fortune and being passionately fond of country pursuits, had the means of gratifying his tastes to their fullest bent. Although Dick and I were very differently constituted, we had always been greatly attached to each other. In the best sense of the term, he was what is generally called a hard-headed practical man. He was fond of saying he never believed in anything he couldn't see, and even that which he could see he was not prepared to accept as truth without due investigation. In short, Dick was neither romantic, poetical, nor, I am afraid, artistic in the literal sense. He preferred facts to fancies and possessed what the world generally called an unimpressible nature. For nearly 4 years I had lost sight of my friend while wandering about Europe as tutor and companion to a delicate young nobleman. His death set me free, but I had no sooner returned to England than I was offered and accepted a lucrative appointment in India, and there was every probability of my being absent for a number of years. On returning home I wrote to Dick, telling him of my appointment and expressing a fear that, unless we could snatch a day or two in town, I might not be able to see him, as I had so many things to do. His reply gave me my first intimation of his marriage, and I confessed to some curiosity about the lady he had succeeded in captivating, for I had always thought Dick was cut out for a bachelor. I did not hesitate to accept his cordial invitation. I determined to spare a few days at least of my limited time, and duly notified him of the date of my departure from London and the hour at which I should arrive at the station nearest his residence. Bleak Hill Castle was situated in one of the most picturesque parts of Wales. Consequently, on the appointed day, I found myself comfortably ensconced in a smoking carriage of a London and North Western train. Towards evening, I remember it was May, I was the sole passenger to alight at the wayside station, where Dick awaited me with a smart dog cart. His greeting was hearty, and when his man had packed my traps, we spanked along the country roads in rare style. A drive of 8 miles through the bracing Welsh air brought us to the castle after dark, so I had no chance of observing its exterior, but nothing inside suggested bleakness. Everything was warm, comfortable, and well lit. A maid led me up a broad flight of stairs and along a lofty echoing corridor to a large, well-furnished bedroom. A bright wood fire burned upon the hearthstone, for although it was May, the temperature on the Welsh hills was still low. After a quick change, I joined the company in the dining room, where Mrs Dirckman emphasised her husband's welcome, She was an exceedingly pretty, rather delicate-looking little woman, a striking contrast to her great, bluff, burly spouse. With a few neighbours, we made a party of 12 and sat down to a perfect dinner. When coffee and cigars were reached, talk naturally turned to our host's residence. I gathered that Bleak Hill Castle had originally belonged to a Welsh family distinguished chiefly by the extravagance and gambling propensities of its male members. Stories of wrong, shame, and more than whispered crime clung to it. One tale concerned the mysterious disappearance of the wife and epileptic daughter of a certain Mr. Greeter Jones, a gloomy, disappointed man who had married for money. They had, he said, gone to London, yet no one had seen them depart, and no investigation followed. Some weeks later, Jones himself went away, this time certainly to London, and for a long period the castle stood empty. People soon whispered that sights and sounds of an unearthly kind haunted the place. Tenants shunned it, smugglers occupied it for a while, and finally hard-headed Dick Dirckman bought the wreck for an old song and made it a gentleman's home. Next day I found the locality as beautiful as Dick had promised. From the windows one commanded a magnificent prospect of landscape and sea. My host delighted in showing every nook and corner, expatiating on the beauties of the neighbourhood and the advantages of his dwelling. Why he kept the so-called haunted chamber until last, I cannot say, but when he ushered me in, smiling ironically, he remarked, "Well, old man, this is the ghost den, and as I consider that a country mansion of this kind should have its haunted room, I have let it go untouched. But I needn't tell you I regard the ghost stories as rot." The room absorbed my attention. It was the largest in the castle, and, while harmonious with the rest of the house, had characteristics of its own. Dark oak panelling covered the walls. The polished oak floor gleamed. A deep V-shaped bay held diamond-paned windows, each with an oak chest seat beneath. A massive wooden bedstead with heavy hangings stood in one corner. The remaining furniture was of the strangest medley. A yawning fireplace displayed ponderous rusty dogs, and the windows commanded superb views. The place instantly stirred every romantic fibre in me. "I like this room, Dick. Let me occupy it, will you?" He laughed. "Upon my word, you are eccentric to forsake the cosy den I assigned you for this mouldy, draughty, dingy old lumber room. However, there's no accounting for tastes. I'll tell the servants to put the bed in order, light a fire and cart your traps across." I was glad to have gained my point. When Mrs Dirckman heard of the change, she laughed, though a nervous tremor escaped her. "I'm sorry you're going to sleep there. It always makes me shudder. It seems so uncomfortable. Besides," she glanced at her husband, "though Dick calls me a little goose, I half believe there may be something in the stories. Anyway, I wouldn't pass a night in that room for a crown of gold." I assured her I should be comfortable and little likely to fear apparitions. The day passed in exploring the country, and after dinner Dick and I played billiards until 1 o'clock. Having drained a final peg, I went to bed. The servants had done their best to make the haunted chamber cheerful. Rugs lay on the floor, 2 modern chairs had been added, and a wood fire blazed merrily. On a small table stood a silver jug of hot water, an antique decanter of spirits, lemon and sugar. Grateful for such thoughtfulness, I donned dressing gown and slippers, drew a chair to the hearth, lit my pipe and mused. Suddenly my pipe was drawn gently from my lips and laid upon the table. At the same moment I heard a sigh. For an instant I wondered whether I was awake or dreaming, but there sat the pipe on the table, apparently placed by unseen hands. After some self-reasoning, I concluded my senses had tricked me. Half asleep, I must have moved the pipe myself. I undressed, extinguished the candles and got into bed. Though a good sleeper, I lay for some time awake, listening to the sea booming on the distant beach and the wind piping round the house. Gradually I dozed, only to wake with a start as though ice-cold water were pouring over my face. In the darkness a horrible spectacle materialized. Suspended between floor and ceiling in a trembling nebulous light appeared the head and shoulders of a woman. A ghostly hand knotted in her tangled hair. Another clutched a long knife, hacking and stabbing at her white throat until the blood gushed and dripped upon the floor. The paralysed face froze in death. Then the devilish hands flung the head aside, and I heard a low chuckle of satisfaction. The light faded, the vision vanished. Yet I was still bound in a rigid spell. Then the glow returned, revealing the corpse of a young girl, her throat similarly gashed, blood soaking her nightdress. Once more the spectral hands seized the body, bore it away, and that scene dissolved into a third, a gloomy arched cellar where the same hands walled both victims into a cavity of rough brickwork. It may have lasted seconds or hours, but when the final image disappeared, the spell snapped. I flung my arms about and uttered a great cry as I sprang up. A mass of embers glowed on the hearth. The wind moaned round the house. Impelled by irresistible force, I opened the door and stared into the long corridor. A sigh laden with unfathomable sorrow reached me. Then a luminous woman, garments blood-stained, hair dishevelled, glided from the darkness, her eyes pleading, her finger pointing downward. She beckoned and I followed, barefoot and half mesmerised, along passages and down a flight of stone steps to a heavy barred door. There the spectre vanished. I returned somehow to my bed. I recall nothing more until daylight. It was a brilliant morning. Shaken and agitated, I paced the lawn, asking myself whether my experiences bore any significance. Presently Dick appeared and started at my pallor. "You look queer. Bad night?" "A bad night indeed." "Seen anything?" "Yes." He became gravely interested. The door I described, he said, closed a vault beneath the house. He had never opened it. We decided to explore at once. With the head gardener, we found the key, forced the lock, and descended the slimy steps. The arched cellar stretched beneath a great part of the building, its earthen floor soft and oozy, the air foul despite narrow ventilators. By candlelight we noted in one angle a strip of comparatively new brickwork. Dick tapped it, the sound was hollow. He sent the gardener for a crowbar. The first bricks prized out released a sickening stench. Dick held up his candle, then recoiled, face white. Within the recess lay decayed human remains. Police were summoned, the wall was entirely removed, and two bodies, a woman and a girl, were brought to light. Medical evidence proved they had been brutally murdered. The countryside at once recalled the disappearance of Mrs Greta Jones and her epileptic daughter. Further inquiry showed that Jones, after leaving Wales, had squandered his fortune in London and, while drunk, been killed beneath a cab. A navvy named Howell Williams, once often seen at the castle and later suddenly well supplied with money, had vanished overseas. No living culprit remained to punish, but no one doubted that Greta Jones had murdered wife and child and walled them up with the navvy's aid. The discovery so affected Mrs Dirckman that she declared she would go mad or die if she remained. For her sake Dick sold the property. Bleak Hill Castle again fell into neglect and was ultimately razed, modern buildings rising on its site. As for me, that night of horror turned my hair prematurely grey, and even now, when memory recalls the dripping knife and those pleading eyes, an indefinable dread chills my blood. The end.